Um, it looks like, you have a pretty interesting background. And so maybe we should just start with what should we know about you and what are you doing over at Charter Communications?
Okay. Well, I've been in HR for over 25 years. Prior to being in HR, I was a paralegal doing antitrust litigation, managing searches for a major oil company, and moved into corporate matters as the antitrust litigation moved away. From that, I got the bug for doing HR. After doing some work for a couple of the litigators, I really got into HR, and so I was looking for an opportunity and found one with a small business, and that's been my career ever since. I've been involved in so many different things over the years as an HR person that I feel like I've pretty much run the gamut of most opportunities within the HR realm, from recruiting to employee engagement to employee relations, and to even developing programs for the company to make business.
Right. And so what does your role specifically deal with now over at Charter?
At Charter, I'm the HR director for the San Diego location, where I'm responsible for the recruiting team as well as the employee relations, doing corporate matters, some leadership development within the center. My team is hiring the classes that come in every 2 weeks and start to help you figure out what's wrong with your cable or your internet when it's going down.
Right, right. So one of the things I like to ask people who kind of have this affinity for HR that seem to really understand it and live it is, does HR exist to serve the needs of the business or the employees?
It at the end of the day, it really serves the need of the business, but in both cases, you have to kind of figure out who's really working in the right direction for the business. We've all heard the story of the rainmaker, who everybody knows as good old Joe. Old Joe doesn't mean that. Because he's making the company money, he's a good person that we don't want to mess with. We don't want to fool around with that mojo that he's got.
Right.
But in the end of the day, you end up getting into a lawsuit or something like that because of Joe's inability to keep his control what he says out of his mouth. So you got to look at it from that perspective. And then sometimes when I say the business, the leadership of the business, sometimes they're right and sometimes the employee's right. But my job as an HR professional is to make sure I protect that entity, whether that's taking the side of whomever I feel is the right one and making sure that we do the right thing.
And it's interesting you bring up that kind of that lone wolf special person thing.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many examples just in the last few years of businesses I know that have gotten into lawsuits and into trouble, and they were trying to keep this special person who had unique knowledge about something or was a rainmaker for, particular accounts and whatever it was. And it's like, sexual harassment cases, trademark cases, copyright cases, confidentiality case. I mean, just all this stuff that and then when they started digging deeper, they found out that that person was causing people to leave, not come and join the team because of them. They didn't realize how far that negativity sort of stretched, right?
Right.
And so maybe since we started here, what should companies do in that? I mean, how do you tackle an issue like that?
Well, I think a lot of companies now have adopted core values and they use them and say, this is what we do. Do you walk your talk? I mean, I think that's really the question that you got to ask company. Do you walk your talk? Do these things really mean anything? Or are these just nice little things you've got on a poster somewhere for people to think about every now and then?
Right.
I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to go to Zappos University and watch how they were working with their culture with this self-organization, self-leadership, holacracy, I think is the concept. I didn't really get into the holacracy whole thing of self-management. I mean, I think that I'm still a little bit old school because I'm old, but I believe that there are a lot of different ways to manage it. And what companies need to do is they need to really be able to walk the talk. They need to be able to hire, fire, promote, and go to market with their core values, because their core values really need to mean something. And as I was told by a partner, we had an issue when I was with a management consulting government contractor, and there was an issue with one of the rainmakers. This guy had done something inappropriate, and the leaders were wringing their hands trying to figure out what to do. And this partner said, if we're not going to live by our core values, what good are they? And all of a sudden, everybody got into line and started to realize that this is really where we need to let the rubber meet the road. We need to be living and breathing our core values, or else we're just giving lip service to a bunch of words on paper.
Right, right. And there's so many different approaches, and I often have said, it's, do you have a strong approach implemented, and are you following it and living it, breathing it are you walking the talk, or talking the, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Are you walking the walk and talking the talk, right? And so I think, at least for me at that level, if you're doing that, even if we could argue about, is this system or that system better or worse, but are you doing something consistently, right? And so I'm not a big fan of the Zappa where they've sort of migrated to. I think there's some real problems there, or maybe we're not ready for that yet. We haven't evolved, but they have a thing and it works for them, and that's sort of the difference. So, do you think companies really do you agree? Do they need to have something that are really have figured out and they're going to stick with? And does that change as maybe the sort of the tides of unemployment? Because you and I were talking about right now there being so little unemployment that it's difficult. So do things kind of change based on employment numbers, or does it change based on the values of the executive team, or when does that kind of change?
I think both of those things are very valid reasons for things to change. For me, one of the things, and I've had some great mentors over the years. And I worked with a Dr. Jeff Kessler at the company called Kessler Exchange. He was the guy who worked for P&G and got Pampers on the market before the competition was. But I've always believed you've got to do the same thing whether the market's up or the market is down. Now, when it's an employer's market, I think you got to spend some time in experimenting and looking at different opportunities and options and things that you can do for when that market turns around. Because the business cycle is generally 7 years. Things are going to change in 7 years, and so you're going to have to make that move, and you're going to start being in that situation where the unemployment's low, you're not able to get the top talent. So some of those creative things you thought about when the market was good for you as an employer, you need to start bringing into play and looking at how those things are going to obviously propel you. You know that old saying, if you're doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity.
Right.
So you don't want to be insane. So you want to make sure that you look at some different ways of doing things and experiment with them when you're not at risk. Look at those things when you're not. I need to get 18 people in here by next week. Do it when you can take your time. We can be a little bit more leisurely about it.
Right. It's not a good idea to learn how to swim when you fall off the boat.
Exactly.
You need to have prepared, right?
Exactly. And most companies don't do that. Most companies will do the opposite. Most companies, when the market turns down, they'll start pulling back their recruiting. They'll start pulling back their marketing. And I don't believe that's the right way. I think you need to keep your name out there because the market will turn around. They need to know who you are. And if they've seen you and felt you all the time through this bad turn, they'll remember you when things go better.
Yeah, it's amazing how that concept of consistency is such a huge part of marketing. And if you're spotty or you pull it back and then people, you can't just magically show up and regain all of that trust for them seeing your company, seeing your logo, seeing your job openings, right, over and over. Well, we talked about AI a little bit in the first part of this of the show today, and so I'm kind of wondering though if we turn this a little bit into more data analytics, where are you seeing that playing a role in today's HR department?
It's extremely important, and I think if you're going to be a strategic HR person, you need to get into data analytics. You need to start looking at the numbers and start talking to the business in their own language. The business uses data analytics numbers. They look at ROI and P&Ls and all those numbers. Well, HR's got to do the same thing to be a strategic partner for the business. Number one, you got to know what the business does. I mean, I was disappointed some years ago. I joined the company, and one of my direct reports who had been there 2 years, and I asked her a question about, well, what does this mean? What does this thing mean? Because I was new to the industry myself. And she said, I don't know. I don't really get into the business stuff. Wrong answer. A very wrong answer. You need to know the business. How are you going to help them consult with your business if you don't know what they do? Right. If you don't understand all the ins and outs and what the acronyms mean, even down to that level. So I think that understanding what the data analytics tell you is going to help you as an HR professional to really kind of get ahead of some of the issues, or even discover that there are issues that you don't have. And those things have got to be coupled with a couple of things. Obviously, there's anecdotal information you can get from just walking the floor, which I suggest for any leader. You got to walk the floor. You got to understand what makes your people tick. And then you've got your exit interview information. Now, compile all those three together. I think you get a pretty good idea of what your staff is, what's going on, what's the morale of the company, and it really gives you some clues as to what types of people programs you should be developing for that staff that you have on board now.
And so do you find, I mean, in that equation, how much weight do you give exit interviews? Because that's always been sort of an area of, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but if you're sort of gauging those people who are leaving, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a particular group of people. You might expect them to be unhappy, or you might expect them to be more critical as they're on their way out the door. It might to say different things than maybe people who are happy or sitting in their jobs and will be there again and again year after year. Mm-hmm. So what kind of weight do you put into exit interviews and looking at that equation?
I put a lot of weight into those. I mean, if you can get people to be honest with you and be candid about what it is, what reason, why they're leaving and what they're leaving for. I mean, in some cases, there's nothing you could do. I mean, there's, they've got an offer made in heaven that no one's ever going to beat. So and it's a good opportunity, and it's an opportunity that they may not be able to get with you. But there are going to be some disgruntled people who walk out the door. And I think you got to listen to those folks, too, and make sure that you understand what's being said. Now, you don't use that as your full gauge. Obviously, you can do employee engagement surveys and see what those things say, as well as you can do pulse surveys and just really the anecdotal information that you get from walking the floor. I make it a point of walking the floor, and believe me, in my career, I have found out so many things because they don't see HR or me as an HR person as the police. They see me as, oh, he's the guy that comes around and speaks to everybody and asks how people's families are doing. And they tell you things. They tell you what's going on. They'll alert you to some problems that are happening on the floor. And that's really where I think you get a lot of it. But those three things together, you got to see, is one different than the other, or are there some similarities? Are we always going in the same direction with all three of these ways of looking at things? So I think that putting those things together is very important, and I've always felt that exit interview information is extremely important too.
And does this all kind of go into testing or evaluating how maybe the employees and the leadership are really accessing core values, right? Mm-hmm. And where does core values play, a really big part in our overall culture and success, or is it like a baseline and then you have to build a lot of other things on top?
I think it's a baseline in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it really needs to be the thread that holds you together as an organization. Mm-hmm. We need to all believe in these core values, and it's hopefully going to weed out those people who don't and attract people who do believe in those things and are willing to go along with a company that sets those values as something that is extremely important and that they will go to market for those things. So it needs to be a baseline. It needs to be at least the minimum requirement, I think, for an organization, if you have them. And if you have them, you got to walk the talk. You got to use them. Don't put them out there as just something nice to say on a nice little plaque that you can stick on the wall and forget about.
Right. Now, do you see this sort of evolving in the future? I mean, I know you said you weren't that big of a fan yet of the Zappos model, but do you see some other opportunities for culture and values and how we work with our people to sort of evolve in our lifetime?
I do, if companies are really willing to stick with them. What I've noticed, and it's just a couple of instances, but I've noticed a couple of instances where I've seen core values that have absolutely nothing to do with people. And they have all to do with business. It's like, okay.
Our core value is profit.
Yeah. Who do you think is going to carry out all these grandiose schemes that you want to do to make more money for your organization? It's people, and you got to focus on people. I mean, management consulting companies tend to have a leg up because they know that they sell people's time and expertise, and that is their only product. They don't have widgets, they don't have vacuum cleaners, they don't have anything. Right. It's people's time as an expertise that they're selling. So they understand that people are their most important asset. And I think with any organization, if you don't believe people are your most important asset, I think you're missing the boat, and you probably have high turnover and disgruntled employees all over the place.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of things certainly about your job that is rewarding, I'm sure, that you enjoy, even if they're challenges or probably things you enjoy being able to tackle and to do. But, we always like to kind of look at maybe the opposite too, right?
Right.
And so I'm wondering, is there something inside of this, world of HR that maybe you don't like? That's kind of your least favorite thing to deal with.
It's always been terminating people.
Okay.
I mean, you change people's lives forever. My first HR job, my first day, my first hour, I had to terminate someone who I had been friendly with. And the reason I was put into HR was doing research. I just come from being a paralegal. I was doing research. The HR manager left. The owner said, "Hey, you've been a paralegal. Why don't you be the HR manager?" And I jumped at the opportunity. But the first day, first hour, I had to let somebody go.
Wow.
Who, I'd been very friendly with. He was a member of the sales staff, and he just wasn't hitting his numbers. It was just the strangest thing. So I've never liked that. And I'd rather see the light bulb go off from some counseling or mentoring that we've done with some employees than to have to send them home.
Right. And that's always tough. And, if someone maybe in sales makes it a little easier for us, it's a pretty cut and dry. Here was your number. You didn't make it.
Right.
It's not a surprise to anybody. But then there's other ones, right? Is it just not a good fit? Is it just not working out? It's a little bit more difficult sometimes with some of those, right? And you got to go maybe term someone because in your heart they're not in the right fit, they're not in the right job.
Right.
But you look at the numbers and the things, and there isn't as good of a story, right? And I find those to be the most difficult as well.
Right. Well, my philosophy has always been that discipline is meant to improve behavior and not meant to get people out the door. And hopefully, you're coaching your managers and leaders to make the right kinds of, when they do discipline an employee, to make the right kinds of decisions and choices that are going to help this person get on track, not just to say, okay, bad kid, you're getting slapped on the wrist. No, let's improve this. Give this person a plan. Give them some type of things that they need to accomplish. Spend some more time with them. Mentor that person. Coach that person. Make sure you can do everything you did, because as your last guest was talking about, companies spend a heck of a lot of money hiring and getting people up to speed, and it's quite a while before you get the ROI back out of that person. So think about that when you're coaching a person, in that this person has not met their ROI for the company. Let's make sure that we can keep them in any way, shape, and form that we can. And sometimes you can't, and so you have to cut your losses at that point. But at least I like to see that you've tried and you've spent the time and you've been passionate about trying to help that individual get on up to speed.
We're certainly aware of the transactional things that HR is tasked with, and you've given us a pretty good head start here with some of the more strategic things that HR can be doing with the coaching and working with managers. What else should HR really be focusing on from a strategic level, to be valuable to the organization at that much higher level?
Well, obviously understanding the business, and I think getting involved in the business. I've had the opportunity in my career at multiple companies to be a part of groups building new business for the organization, trying to make sure that we have the people perspective in there. I think I've been on proposal teams with government contracting, so I understand what they're going after and all the different aspects of that proposal that they're throwing out to try to win this procurement. I think those are things where HR has to be involved. I think HR has to be innovative in terms of the places where they can reach into. Go to business meetings that have nothing to do with HR. Go to other meetings. Learn the business. Make sure you know it just as well as your leader does there. And then you can make a meaningful contribution. Talk about business. Talk about the things that you can get involved in as an aspect of being one of their employees, because we're all going in the same direction, hopefully, for the same thing. And HR just needs to make sure they embed themselves a little bit more deeply into the business and not be an us and them type of situation.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I was wondering, to kind of get your view on how HR reports. Should they report up through the business, or should they have a kind of a straight line to an HR organization? Maybe a dotted line into the business units, or vice versa. How does HR most effectively help the company from a reporting standpoint?
Well, I think, and I've been in both, and I think both have their particular positives and negatives. I mean, on the one hand, I think if you're reporting up through the business, it gives you great time and a great ample opportunity to be involved with what the business does. If you're reporting up to a business leader, and if you're reporting up through an HR leader, you're still kind of separate, but at the same time, you feel a little bit more sheltered, I guess, by that being part of that team. I've been with both, and I think both can work depending upon what it is that, what type of company it is and what type of organization, and how they review and respect and use the HR department as a business partner.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, you and I had the opportunity before the show to meet and get to know each other a little bit, and you have really a fascinating, background with the different jobs and things that you've done up to this point and the places you've lived. And I'm wondering, it kind of came to mind in my head as we were talking. I thought I'll save this one for the show, and that is there a person, is there a leader, is there a mentor that you had that maybe kind of got you where you are today from a leadership standpoint? Maybe not specifically that you are in HR, but as a leader, was there someone that really had a big impact on you?
I've definitely been lucky enough to have several of these types of folks in my career. Probably one of the first one was the dean I worked with at Occidental when I was a student there, and he and I eventually had a business together after both of us had left Oxy and gone on our separate ways and done different things. But he taught me a lot about being politically aware of what's going on, of understanding the ropes of the different things that were going on, how business fits into this education that you just got or this education that you get, and how do you make sure that you're getting something valuable out of it? How do you look for transferable things that you can do? Just because you majored in this doesn't mean you can't do this. So he was good, and I think another boss who was extremely good, I just remember when he hired me and he said, you need to get a good exercise plan because you're going to need to be running on all cylinders at all time. So I suggest a good exercise plan so that you can keep yourself sharp and keep yourself fit, and because we're going to run you, we're going to make you work, we're going to put you on a plane every 2 weeks and you're going to be gone, so we need to do that. So I think in those cases, both of those folks, and there have been a lot of people throughout the years who've really given me some great mentorship. I mean, I'm still in touch with professors from college and things like that, so it's been very good, and has really helped me to become the kind of HR person that I have become.
Yeah, and so a lot of what we become as people and as leaders comes from, I think, from our mentors. It comes from the experiences and the jobs that we have, but I think it also comes from the books that we choose to read.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm wondering if there's a book you typically suggest that people check out, or one that maybe you are on right now or recently read that you might suggest to the audience.
It's a book that I occasionally read, and I come back to it every now and then, and it is a book by, I'm missing the name, but one of the books I'm reading right now, I think that's been a really good book for me, is The New Leadership Literacies by Bob Johansen. He's a member of the Institute for the Future, and he's basically saying that the book is about thriving in a future of extreme disruption and distributed everything. So the book challenges leaders to think about what it is going to be in the future and to start making plans for the future. So he's a futurist. He looks way out. 20, 30, 40, 50 years out into the future based upon what's going on now. And he's saying that leaders need to have that same type of a vision to kind of pull themselves further out and kind of understand what kind of workforce they're going to need for further on down the line, and really start to building that now so that they don't get there and are already behind the eight ball. So that's one of the books I'm reading right now, and it's a very interesting concept, and it kind of brought me back to that whole holacracy, Zappos. It really reminded me of that experience of going through Zappos University, of some of the same things he's talking about building for the future.
Well, you think about how different leadership is. There's some examples of it being more like it is today. Let's just go 60 or 70 years back. But most of what was happening 60 or 70 years back is so radically different than what we're doing now, right? Just even conversations and talking about culture and things like this, right? People all showed up in suits or in very formal outfits and went to work. It was a much different thing happening. We've got people in T-shirts and shorts going to work every day doing, probably bigger work and more important work than a lot of these other people who were in full suit. Everything's sort of changed. And as you think about that massive change, how might that change again? I mean, it's really fascinating that author you suggested is already thinking about that. In 70 years or 50 years, whatever it is, will it change so dramatically again that that today's leadership will seem, just almost unbelievable that it would even existed that way, right?
I think it will. I mean, I think the future is going. As your last guest was already saying, AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. So you got a lot of people who are going to be doing something different, and we've got to start, figuring out what are people going to do for the new economy that's coming up in 20, 30 years when those folks get into their prime earning years for their careers. It is going to change. We don't know how, but we think things are going to be a lot more loose, a lot more. I guess, as it is now, we see people don't have to come to the office. People are working from home. There are different types of being mobile and being able to do the job from anywhere in the world that you used to have to sit at a desk in a certain city in a certain state in order to do. So I think that's even going to happen quite a bit. In the gig economy, they talk about that, a lot more consulting and picking up gigs here and there and doing that. I think that's going to continue to flourish over the next few years too.
Right. Well, if people are interested in learning more about you, and I know you have some job openings in customer service and other places as well in the San Diego area, how can they find out more about you and Charter Communications?
They can go to www.charter.com and look at the opportunities and openings. We are hiring in San Diego, so those opportunities are listed there. I'm putting together a class every 2 weeks right now in hiring customer service agents. So I have quite a few openings, and we're doing a lot of recruiting to kind of keep that going as we continue to grow. Get in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm an open networker. If you want to look me up, Milton Grren Jr. SPHR, MNGJR at Cox.net. I'm always open to mentoring and helping particularly newer, more junior HR people to get their foothold in the door, because I do HR a little bit differently, having had that legal background first before going into HR. It's usually the other way around. They go from HR to legal, but I've had a very different look at it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Milton, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have enjoyed getting your perspective on HR and what's going to be happening in the world of work going forward.
Well, thank you.
Hopefully we have you back at some point and hear about your newest adventures.
Well, yes, there will be some new ones coming up. I'm working on some things now.
Awesome. All right, thank you everyone for listening to today's show. Hopefully you gained something you can use in your own career in a positive way. Next week, my two guests will be Regina Romeo, the Director of HR at CPS, HR Consulting, and Vinjay Johar, the CEO of, I don't know, is that Chili Inc. I'm going to go with that. We'll find out next week if I've murdered that company name. So until then, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People G2.